Welcome back to another episode of the Autonomy Pods podcast, and it's just me on my own today. We're going to talk about why you can't stick to your diet. Now, this is probably one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world, because of how important nutrition is to either achieving fat loss or achieving weight maintenance. We do need to make sure that this is like a really massive focal point in the people that want to lose weight or maintain, that they know how to stick to something that they've given themselves. Now, sticking to a diet comes in is so multifactorial. Like when you break it down of why people don't do what they said they're going to do, it goes and spans and spider webs into things like economics. It spans into relationships. It spans into self-esteem. It spans into likes and dislikes. And then it spans on the flip side of things into the actual nutrition, the actual way to track things or the way to eat it, or even the way that you cook it and how your skills in terms of cooking a decent meal become, because all of these factors will result in whether you take an easy approach or whether you take a approach that complies with other people's opinions, and then that results in then calories not being managed the way that they need to. So I'm going to break this down into a few different sections. One is going to be the relationship, the social event, the perception of like offending people, and the perceptions of which we have upon when we're trying to make better choices for ourselves compared to what we've done in the past. So, for the last 5 years, I've worked with the South Asian community for the most primarily within the coaching business. Sure, we do let white people in and we do let anyone else in if they want to, but most of just how it happened is that, we got a name, or I got a name for getting South Asians in shape and amazing shape and keeping it off for life. So when we were looking at this dynamic of what they struggled with on a week-to-week basis and why they could not be compliant with, set regulations of either calorie targets or, how would they go into weekends and stick to their goals. And it came down to one, is that the opinion of others really matter to us as humans. Our perception is to be liked, and we want to be liked at all times. We don't want to be viewed in a negative manner, whether that's a subset of us or humans just in general. We want to be, brought into a tribe. We want to be part of something. We want to be, we get the fear of missing out very, very easily. And that comes down to wanting to be part of something with other people. So as you can imagine, if you for the last 10 years have gone to restaurants with your friends and just ate what they're eating, or you've chosen some stuff off the menu, maybe you're accustomed to having, every time you go to a restaurant, you're always accustomed to like sharing a few starters, getting a pizza or getting a dish, and then having a bit of dessert and maybe some wine. And if you've been doing that, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But obviously, you have to take into consideration that if you want to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit, which means that you have to eat less than what you burn. And then you have to make the choices that allow you to stay within that range. Now, unfortunately, there's some really good research to show that about 70% or 75% of all main meals at restaurants, and they did research on like thousands and thousands of restaurants, are all over 1,000 calories, which means that you can assume that when you have a main meal at a restaurant, it's going to be plus 1,000 calories, unless somewhere like Nando's, when you can like pick the calories that you want based on the dishes, or Wagamama's, or Pret, or Eat, or these are the places that have calories. Especially in America, you can definitely look at the menus and they will always have the calories on, and you'll be hard pressed to find something under 700 calories. And that makes it really, really difficult for you to stay within your calorie range when you're in that social event, right? Because if you combine a main meal plus sharing a starter, then you're at 1,200, 1,300 calories already. You then combine that with getting a bottle of wine for the table. You have a glass of wine, which is 250, 400 calories, depending on how big. And you're already nearly at most people's daily allowance of food intake. So unless you've starved yourself for all of the day and then had that meal, you'll find it hard pressed to stay within your calories unless you do a high level of activity for the whole day. So instead of burning a normal 10,000 steps and like being 70 kilos, you'll do 20,000 steps, which may burn an extra 1,000 calories. So you have an extra bit of leeway. So really, unless you're willing to do lots and lots and lots of activity on top of what you already do, and then only have a main and maybe a small starter, you probably won't stay underneath your calories when you're going to these social events if you eat like you've eaten before. So then when you are starting a diet, when you do start a new way of looking at things, most people, and definitely online coaches are very guilty of this, they'll sell the fucking dream. The dream will be to get in amazing shape and not give up your favorite foods or not give up your social life. And that leads you into a false sense of security. You know, we never promise that you'll have to not give up your social life, because ultimately it depends what your social life was. If you were going out 4 days a week doing exactly what I just spoke about, or even if you're going out twice a week and doing exactly what I spoke about, you'll find it hard pressed to get amazing results. Unless you're willing to, I spoke about this on another podcast, unless you're willing to give up your normal other 5 days and eat fucking poverty calories and eat like dust, you won't be able to balance the calories. So when people go into these scenarios with the social events where, for the last 3 to 5 years, they've gone with their family on a Friday to the takeaway, or they go and have fish and chips or whatever, and then they have to make this change. And as an individual, they'll be now more conscious about the calories that they're eating because they're part of a process, because they're on a quote unquote diet, which means that they have to think about eating less, or they have to think about what they're eating as opposed to just going in and having the time with their friends and family, because now they're more conscious of these specific dynamics. So then when they're pressed in that moment with their friends, their family, the relationships that they have to make a different choice, they'll be presented with this inner turmoil of speaking out and choosing something different off the menu, or making a different suggestion of what they're going to eat on the menu, which then disassociates them with the people that are on the table. Now, some people may get lucky and they may have friends that are already quite conscious around the food intake. They already they don't share all the meals at dinners, and they individually pick their foods that they are allowed. And if they don't get a starter, they just don't get a starter. You may have some friends like that, and that's great. You go out with those friends all of the time. But for the most part, most cultural Asian, South Asian, Indian, that side of the east of the UK, is that the commonalities is that when you go to these restaurants, you share dishes and you try different ones. And I've been out a few times before, and I didn't understand this 5 years ago. So when I first went out for my first ever full proper Indian meal, I just chose something off the menu, and all the other people around me chose dishes as well. And then someone put their fucking spoon in my dinner, and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Get your fucking spoon out of my dinner. That's my chicken curry." And they were like, "Oh, but we're sharing." I was like, "But I don't want to share. I chose this for me, and I don't care about what you're eating. I'm controlling my calories, so don't take my chicken away from me. It's all I've got." And at that moment in time, I realized that, hang on a minute, they do it differently the way that I do. So when you do go to these dinners and events, that's the inner turmoil that comes, because you have to separate yourself from the norm, which has probably been a reason why you're not in shape in the first place. So when you separate yourself from that norm, you have this inner turmoil of not being included. The fear of missing out gets higher. The comments around that also gets higher, because they're not used to seeing you make those changes, or you're not the guy that's ordered a salad before, but now you are. Of course you're going to get the questions from your mates, especially if they're lads, or especially groups of girls. It's going to be or even your mum and dad that have never been really on a diet before, they're going to be like, "Well, why are you choosing that? Why are you changing what we do?" And in those moments, that reaction, or that challenge, we'll call it, normally leads people to change their tune very quickly and revert back to their normal behaviors, because they don't want to be missed out. They don't want to have the fear of missing out. They don't want to be detached away from the tribe. And then they go and eat the food at the dinner table and feel incredibly guilty for it, because they know that that wasn't going to lead them towards their goals. And every single week they go around in these spiral of say, next week will be better, next week will be better. But then the same scenario comes up, just with a different group of friends. It's now drinks on a Friday at a cocktail place for someone's birthday. and then you're going to go and you say, yeah, okay, I'm going to go. I know I can factor in about 3 to 4 drinks, some gin and tonics, and then I can eat for the rest of the day. I'm not eating poverty calories to get there. Then you get to the drinks, and then the fourth one goes in, and then the fifth one, someone goes, "Oh, I'll get the next round," and then you get that inner turmoil again of being like, "Oh, I don't, I can't have another one because I set myself a 4 drink rule." And then what happens is that again, you don't want to be part, you don't want to disassociate, especially with some alcohol already been drank. You may get some comments about, oh, like, why are you drinking G&Ts instead of beer? You're always on the beer, or, oh, why don't you have another one? And those challenges always either revert people back to agreeing, all right, I'll have another one then, and then feeling incredibly guilty about that. And then equally, on the flip side of that, if they do make that decision, then they'll feel that disassociation from that group of friends. So even in this scenario, you've got quite a lot of challenge and quite a lot of things that are hard when it comes to you following this calorie intake. And there are multiple solutions and methods to this problems that are quick, easy tactics, like eating dust and then having more at the weekend, or when you go out, you just don't expect fat loss on that particular day. But if we look at the crux of what this actually means, if you can't go to social events and choose what you want to do and act the way you want to do, it's very apparent that you are influenced by other people way more than what you think you are. And you're probably not your own person. You've not got your own identity. You've not got your own likes and dislikes. And you're very much driven by pleasing others and putting yourself in those scenarios. Now, when you're moving down in body weight and you're losing 10, 15, 20 kilos, you're going to disassociate yourself from people around you because they're probably also in that 10, 15, 20 kilo barrier. And that means you have to act differently to these people. So when it comes to those social events, think about how you're acting and whether you're your own person. And that's why it makes it incredibly difficult for people who don't know themselves or know what to say or stand up to challenge, find it incredibly difficult to manage social events in the long term. Because if you can imagine this, okay, sure, you eat dust all week and then you go out at the weekend and you don't have to face that challenge because you've fucking starved yourself all week. And then you come to your maintenance phase. Are you still going to eat dust during the week? Or how long is it realistically possible for you to eat very low calories during the week to then get that big expense at the weekend? Your mood and energy during the week is going to be significantly lower. Your hunger is going to be higher. And how long can you really go experiencing hunger on a week to week basis without you then going, oh, fuck it, like I'll have a donut on a Tuesday. And then it all then unravels because you've gone over your calories during the week and you've got the big events at the weekend and then you start gaining weight incrementally. It's a very common case that, like, nurses, and if any nurses are listening to this, it's only my reference points is that, I worked with my mum for a while who runs a older people service, and I work with physios, nurses, occupational therapists and psychologists. And you'll always have the nurses that are there that are dieting. They're either taking the fucking Cambridge diet or they got the soups or the smoothies or whatever they've got, and they'll do it for 2 or 3 weeks. But then as soon as someone's birthday comes on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday and the team go, oh, let's get some donuts or let's get the chippy tea in because we're doing these type of things, then they cave because everyone else is doing it. And then they lose that fat loss for the week. And then they get in the pattern of having stuff at work on a Tuesday or a Thursday. And then they basically zero out their ability to lose weight or ability to maintain it because they just put it back on very, very, very quickly. And I feel like in this scenario, when we're looking at social circumstances and being able to get what you want out of that scenario, if you don't take control, at least for a period of time, before you make the decision to enjoy and indulge in what the other people are doing, because you've had the right strategy and method to do so, then I don't see them succeeding in the long term, because you'll always be at the will of other people. Because if someone else wants to get dessert, you'll be influenced to get a dessert. But if you've got your own strong character and you've factored your week to have a dessert, then you can be included. But if you've also not factored in your week to have a dessert and then you get influenced to have a dessert, you're then also over 400 calories. You're over 500 calories, whatever the dessert will be. And then you'll have this inner turmoil of psychological, emotional a feeling of either failing or the guilt of going over your calories. And then you'll end up then restricting tomorrow to make up for it even more aggressively. And those type of diets are very, very dangerous from a psychological perspective, because if you eat over, then you restrict the day after. It's just a negative mindset towards how you're eating. But also it puts people in a hole and makes it harder for that week of dieting to actually happen. So that's only one reason why people can't stick to their diet when it comes to the social side of things. Next is a combination of those things, which is like relationships and family. When you're at home, when you come up through the years of, I don't know, 11 to 21, there'll be things that your family do on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis which will mold the way you do things. When I was at university, I effectively carbon copied what my mum and dad did on a week-to-week basis with food, because I had no other reference point, right? Like, I wasn't at 11 deciding what I was going to eat on a day-to-day basis. I was just given something on a Monday. And those kids that get to decide when they're 11 are just picky bastards, in my opinion. I just got given what I was given, and if it was like chicken, it was chicken. If it was turkey, if it's not, maybe I got a choice on the weekends where we wanted to go for lunch on a Saturday, or what I wanted to get from the takeaway. But I was never one of those picky kids that was getting the choice of things. And I was molded into thinking that, Monday is like a spag bowl day, Tuesday is a chicken curry, Wednesday is this, or Thursday is that. For example, the reason why people have sandwiches for lunch into their 20s is probably because they had sandwiches for lunch when they were growing up and in primary school and in secondary school, because they don't know any different and they're just copying and mimicking other people. So if your family and the relationships that you had within the family dynamic showed these specific symptoms of, like, let's say, for example, at 15, I was explaining this to a friend today. I was like, I ran through what I ate on a day-to-day basis when I was 14 and when I was big, when I was the fattest I've ever been and the unhealthiest I've ever been, which was when I was 14, 15, which is young. But I was running through my day where I was like, I'd have breakfast at home because my mum and dad made me have like cereal or porridge or Weetabix. Then I'd go to school and I'd have a little bit of pocket money. So before school, I'd go with my friends because they were going to the bakery. They were getting stuff from the bakery. In the first week or 2 weeks of like school, I was like, I don't need anything. I've just had breakfast. But then you get into the cycle of going to the bakery and having like a meat pie because we're up north, or you're having a sausage roll, or you have a gingerbread man because gingerbread men are absolutely fire. And then you get to school and then you'd have the lunch that you had. Then you get home from school and you'd probably do what your parents do when they got home from work. So when my dad got home from work, he would go to his computer desk, he'd take some biscuits and sit at his computer desk. And I mimicked that. It was only till like I was like 25 or 26 that I realized I was doing these things back when I was 14. I was just mimicking people around me. And then we'd have dinner, whatever was given, and then before bed I would have a snack. Now that in there is about 5,000 calories, depending on how many biscuits I had, the meat pie that I had, or the gingerbread, or what I had in those meals. And then that became the norm for most of my teenage years until I got to college. I wanted to make change. But here's what happened, and this is what will happen to most people when they're trying to make change within their family home. If you make change to the family dynamic, whether it's from a time perspective, whether it's from a logistical standpoint, or you start buying different stuff from the supermarket in the supermarket sweep as when your parents go on a Saturday or a Sunday, or they get the weekly shopping, then you start getting those questions and you start getting that, why are you doing that? Or you get well, why don't you have this? Or you start getting their impressions upon you about you making that change. And if they're not educated, or your family are not educated on nutrition, or they don't know what a calorie deficit is, or they think that granola and or snacking is healthy, or they think that what they're eating is healthy, then they're going to challenge you significant to do so. And obviously, we've seen this within the South Asian community because most males and females probably don't leave home until their late 20s when they're married or they get engaged. And then one of them, either the female or the male, moves into the other person's family home before they buy a house if they haven't already bought one on the side and letting it out, because that's how you guys like to save your money. So when that happens, you've got from the years of 14 to 16 to 25 to 28 of dealing with other people's opinions of what you should do from a nutrition perspective based on your mum and dad's or the mum and dad's or the aunties and uncles opinion of what is right and what is wrong. And like we said, if they don't have a Scooby-Doo about Scooby-Doo, or they're 100 kilos themselves, then it's more than likely that they don't have a Scooby-Doo about Scooby-Doo. So then you become that middle ground of challenge when you move into a coaching process, or you try and you get some good education about what is right and wrong to eat, calorie intake, calorie deficit, hit your protein, eat some veggies. And if those things haven't been done by your family, you're going to get a incredible amount of resistance, especially if you don't know how to cook and they're cooking the food for you. I make a joke all the time. Most South Asian guys don't know how to cook because they get their family to do it. And when they have to cook for themselves, they end up making shit food, and they end up not doing the diet because they make shit food. And me and Kunal speak about this all the time because he was one of those guys too. He just got it early doors when he was like 2021. And he made the mistakes of making some absolute diabolical food. But then this creates the challenge at home. So you've got that social event challenge that is already going on. And then you've got the home challenge of like your day-to-day eating. So the once or twice a week is fine. Like I said, you can eat dust during the week potentially and eat more at the weekends. But if your week during the week is then challenged by your family members or the people that you live with, because it's not quote unquote the norm or what they expect as a healthy dinner, or it's just completely different. Let's say, for example, if like, you know, they're used to a traditional Indian diet, and then you say, well, I actually want porridge for breakfast, or I actually want like chicken and veggies for breakfast, they're going to be like, well, why are you having that? Or where's the sauce? Or where's the butter? Or where's the roti with it? Or where's the naan bread with it? Or where's the rice with it? And then you get that challenge. And that becomes incredibly difficult for some people that are low in self-esteem and don't know how to speak to their parents in a logical manner. Two, if they're scared of what their opinion of their parents will say. And three, if they're influenced a lot by the people that they're around, it'll end up being very, very secretive that they're doing this specific diet, which it never ends well for anybody. So then if you've got a challenge at home from a this is what you need to do on a day-to-day basis, and then they're not doing those specific things, versus then at the other side of it, there's a social event occasion, if you're just having that side of things, and then you've got both of those sides, and that, in my opinion, this is why it makes getting South Asian individuals into great shape really difficult. But when you do these two things and you manage these two variables, you end up having this beautiful harmony of like them taking control of both the social life and their home life, which gives you control. It gives you, yourself of own identity. I'm cooking this because I've got this goal, or I'm making this because I'm doing this, or I'm making this decision in a social event occasion because of I'm doing this and this. And then when you take those two factors out, then you look at finances. So social economic period, or like the place of where that stands within your day, is going to be critical within your ability to adhere to a diet. Firstly, is not everybody can afford a coach or someone that can direct them. So then they're at libertum of basically free information on the internet, which may be completely utter tripe. Equally, if you can afford some type of coaching and whatnot, then you'll have the ability to then, or the changing of like where you spend money, how much money you have to spend on these foods. So like, there are families in social economic crisis who will have to buy frozen food from Iceland, or frozen chicken breasts, or canned food to make it last longer, and spread that across the family, which makes it hard to adhere to a diet because you're spreading that across the family or the people that you're with, as opposed to making choices based on what you truly need or want within your day-to-day life. As well as that, you've got the gym membership, the memberships for, if you want some supplements or even clothing to go to the gym, which makes it incredibly difficult for you to do the other things outside of the gym, the dieting too. And then on the flip side of that, all the internal factors. So internal factors like self-perception on self, self-esteem, stress management, and then just general how to like management of their day and time. Now, management of day and time is probably one of the biggest things that people will change the way they do things based on their perception of how much time that they have. And I'm one of these people that literally is in a rush to do everything. My therapist says to me all the time, it's like, what's the rush? I have no answer. I just have done it and always probably will rush to do things because I'm either excited or it gives me that buzz to kind of get laser focused and do it. But it gives me that sense of stress as well because like if I'm coming up to like 4 or 5 p.m. and I'm like, oh fuck, I've got to do this, da 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 da, it plays on my ability to have that stress. So that this side of it from a stress management or time management perspective will lead you to not following your diet because you will do this thing called choose the easy option as opposed to choose the right option. You've always everyone's been in these scenarios of where it's been much easier to just call a takeaway than it has been to prep your own food. Now, there's always obviously a case of that you can choose great takeaways, you can choose calorie controlled ones, you can choose better options when you're there. But when you're in a heightened state of stress, you just think about picking something easy. And if you're with other people, then that'll be molded to maybe what they want to. And then you end up getting the choice that isn't going to be great from a dieting perspective or a calorie deficit perspective. And then when your perspective on time is things like preparation in terms of food intake, planning your week in advance, doing a schedule and structure to when to fit in your training, your nutrition, when to go on a walk, when to do your social life, all these things just go out the window because people are just running on that reactive nature of just I need to get shit done. And when you're in that cycle, and it's called a spin cycle, you just end up not being able to be consistent. And when you can't be consistent, then you can't get enough deficit or enough of time on the diet to get the results that you want. So, people are time poor and they stress about the time that they have. So then they cut corners on what they're doing and do the highest priority stuff and then lead like the fat loss or the structure of how they're eating to the last moment or the last thing, which then makes them choose that easy option, which is then not the greatest option. So to improve the nature of this, being proactive instead of reactive is always going to be critical. There's 25 minutes in my diary on a Friday morning. I get up earlier to do so. So I plan my week in advance. I plan what food I'm having Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I plan if I'm going to social events. I plan my free time. I plan my alone time. I plan my gym sessions of where they go in my structure in my day. I plan what time I'm going to have my breaks for my dinner and my lunch. And then when I finish on Friday, I know exactly what I'm doing for the week ahead. And it's probably one of the easiest strategies that you can do to reduce overwhelm, to reduce the amount of reactivity that goes on. And that whole thing of choosing the easy option over the right option is going to play a massive part when you become more proactive. The people that plan or spend time managing their time instead of their time being managed is that they end up being able to slot things in their diary, be more consistent with that food intake, plan food in advance, to plan a strategy in advance for that social event. And instead of running on reactivity, they go there in a better mindset where they can go, this is the right option I want to choose. I'm going to choose it. Or these are the things that I need to get from the shop. I'm going to do it. Instead of getting to a Friday afternoon and being like, oh, there's nothing in the cupboards, so I'll just get a takeaway, or my family are going to do this, I'm just going to join them. And that becomes that element of consistency, which leads to why you can't stick to your diet. People can stick to diets for 1 to 2 days, but the consistency element comes from that perception of time and the perception of stress, and then how you deal with those other factors that we spoke about before: the social events, the family, the money side of things. And once you can, and this is why like following a diet isn't just a case of willpower. Willpower doesn't work. Like people that just say, "Oh, just give me something, I'll follow it," and it's like, well, here's the thing. If you had that mentality, you wouldn't need me. You're just putting on that suit of armor to say, oh, I'm hardcore, just give me something to follow. It's like, well, if you were really about that life, if you're really about that life, you would have done that without my help. So you're not about that life. You don't have that. You have problems with these factors that we spoke about, and managing those variables. And then the last one I want to speak about from a adherence perspective in terms of following a diet is sleep. Like if there have been periods of your life, whether it's having a new child or going through travel or work travel or business, all that business stuff, or waking up at 6 a.m. and going to bed at 11 a.m. because you're working 12, 13-hour days. It all has an impacting factor on how you are able to follow your diet. We know that sleep does a couple of things to us when we have lack of it. And like getting less than 6 hours is effectively like sleep deprivation, where your hunger will go higher, your perception of stress will also go higher, and your ability to make cognitive decisions will also go lower. So that's a recipe, right? That's a recipe for disaster. You're more hungry, you've got less ability to think about the right things because your cognitive function is down, and then you're also just tired. And that just leads to that whole perception that we spoke about before, which is that easy option over the right option. So when you do those things and you have that recipe for sleep, then no wonder people don't stick to their diet because they make the easy choice, or they haven't prepared anything because they're working all the hours in the day, and then they're wondering why they can't stick to their diet. That isn't a willpower thing. If you look at all of these factors that are playing upon you, managing all of these can be very, very difficult all in one time. So once you look at that, and there is actually way, way more in terms of like why you can't stick to your diet factors that we could go into and endlessly, but these are the real big crux of things. And I hope you got to get more of a gauge on how hard it is to stick to a diet and what you have to manage to be able to do so. Now, if you're lucky and you live in a fucking igloo somewhere and you don't have to deal with any of these things, and you get food, and you're a single guy like I am, you have to deal with less of the problems. Let's say, for example, I've got a pretty decent amount of money. I don't live with anybody. I have like a decent sleep. I only have to contend with two of those things, which is social events and then time management and stress. There's a higher probability that I'll be able to get in shape more than people that have to deal with all five. And like equally, if you're dealing with three of those things, and maybe there's other factors that we haven't spoke about that will come into that too, the less of these that you have to deal with, the easier it is for you to get in shape. So like when you see these before and after pictures, I hope now you see that it's not just about, oh, they stuck to a diet and that was it. The people had to contend, and you don't know how many of these factors they had to contend with to get to where they got to. So like, I always say, like, people always make comments about how, oh, this person looks skinny in the after picture, or they don't look healthy, or they're too lean, or whatever, like whatever there is. They make a judgment based on their own perception of what health is, as opposed to, did they ask the person if they were happy? If you lost 20 kilos, you'd be fucking ecstatic by it. You'd be ecstatic. And then someone comes along and says, oh, that you losing 20 kilos looks worse. No, it doesn't. They lost 20 kilos. You just think they look worse because you've got some baggage with, your own weight loss journey. And then when you look at these journeys and you think about all these contenders of things that could spiral into non-adherence or not dieting, then you kind of respect the game of people getting into shape and then staying into shape for life. And you realize that actually it's a very, very difficult task, and exactly why I've probably devoted my life to making sure that people can do this. And I will continue to devote this autonomy to the ability for people to get in shape and stay in shape for life. And then staying in shape for life is just a completely different ball game that will go into another side of things, more from a mindset perspective and behavior change than anything else. But hopefully from this podcast, you've understood, maybe some factors, maybe it's highlighted to you some of the areas in which you don't particularly manage very, very well. There will be one or two of those that hand on heart that you really are shit at. And every time you go to them or every time you do them, you end up being less adherent or less following your diet than you could have done. Maybe it's time to change that. Maybe it's time to look at it from a perspective of that is your bottleneck. I know for me still that social events is one of those where I struggle with some people. Like I have a good friendship group of like people that are fit in the fitness space. I also have friends that aren't in the fitness space. I have people that are 20 kilos, 30 kilos heavier than me in terms of body fat, and all of these people will present to you different problems when you go to have dinner with them, because not everybody, once you solved one person and said no thank you, I don't want that extra dessert, it doesn't just stop there. It's a considerable constant cycle. And like for some people that I go to dinner with, depending on what mindset I'm in, which is a whole different topic together, you're like, oh yeah, I'll just have that because whatever they're having one too. And definitely from a family perspective, I struggled for a fucking long time. Like, there was times in where, at 16, when I decided to go on a diet, um, my dad was like, I wanna do the cooking. I'm doing the cooking. That's his job. That's his role and responsibility. He was like a little bit of a housewife, bless him, because mum was out there earning the bucks and he was just making dinner. And he kicked me out the kitchen one time, and we had a massive bust up because he was making me food that I'd said, okay, look, I was doing this thing, so just give me like 150 grams of chicken, just give me some veggies, and give me like some sweet potato, like 200 grams of sweet potato. And I come in as the food is about to get ready, and all I just see is the olive oil, the bottle of olive oil being turned upside down, just like gushing out over my chicken and sweet potato. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And like, which obviously I swore to my dad a few times, and that didn't go down very well, and that's why we probably had an argument. But I was like, "What the fuck are you doing? I told you chicken, vegetables, and potato. How hard is that for you to understand?" He's like, "I do it differently here. You know, if you want me to cook your food, then you play by my rules. It's my house, it's my kitchen." And I remember that time, and I remember that now. I remember like the whole conversation that we just spoke about from a family perspective, that these will be happening all over the UK, in all of the world, where parents will be like, no, these are my house, this is my rules, this is how I do it. Because that's what they do, they've always done that. And there'll be variations of that, whether it's like, no, no, you're having this, or it'll be, if you want to do it yourself, if you want to get it, you do it yourself. And that's what ended up happening to me. You know, I ended up having to cook my own meals. And even to this day, really, my dad despises me cooking separate food in the house, even though I don't live there, even though I'm thousands of miles away in Dubai. When I come back and I'm like, oh, I want to cook some chicken, he's like, oh, do you have to? Because he doesn't agree with what I do. He doesn't agree with that I'm not eating differently. Maybe it's that he takes that as a personal attack to think that, oh, my food isn't good enough. And that's what a lot of people will think. So I remember that instance, and like, and then ever since that day, I really struggled to to navigate that scenario, because it was always a conflict, especially when, you know, I wanted to stay over, even when I came back from university. You know, I'd do like I'd be eating my own foods or whatnot, and then eventually over time, I learned a better strategy to deal with this. So I just ate less in the daytimes, and then ate what they would give in the evening, and just took smaller portions. And like, I didn't end up being absolutely spot on with what I wanted, but it was just a strategy to kind of soothe and also just get a blend of what I wanted. And now over time, I've transitioned that to, you know, when I'm back, we'll do like I'll have my own meals during the weeks, and I've got my own flat, but I'll go round to theirs for one meal a week, and they'll cook whatever they want. So like, there's been a transition from that family based perspective that has given me a lot of understanding of what happens when people try and make change within the house, because that happened to me. I wanted to make change. I was unhappy with the way that I looked, and I was unhappy with what I was getting. And it, don't get me wrong, and I was talking about this again to a friend today. I was like, the meals that my dad gave me and made for lunch, and like they give me like, you know, turkey sandwiches with cranberry sauce, and like, you know, really nice bread from Tesco, not the cheap shit. And they give me like really nice dinners that always had a protein source, always had like a sauce over the top, and always had the veggies, and always had rice or potato. Like, the food was really, really good. But it wasn't just those habits that I was doing, right? I was eating the biscuits, I was having snacks in the evenings, my breakfast was like wild or whatever. So like, it was all the combination of the habits that I learned over the years, plus being wrapped up in their environment, that then made me do all of the things that then contributed. And when I wanted to take control of that, I had to take control of the snacking and the eating out of the cupboards that they had like millions of digestive biscuits and Fox's biscuits. But then I also had to take control of the food intake from breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which then caused that major conflict. Because no one really cares if you don't eat the biscuits, but people do care if you don't eat their food, which I found out. So, you know, it's always an evolution of how you think and your understanding, and ultimately it's the communication between the people that you have, even from a social based perspective, even from a relationship perspective, from a family based perspective. And it's the conversations that also you have with yourself from that other time management and stress perspective. Like, if you can learn to have better conversations and be quite confident in what you're saying, to yourself, and how you're self talking and saying about, okay, no, don't worry, we got enough time to do that, we're planning week, and you're saying that to yourself on repetition, things get easier to manage. And equally in social events, if you're vocalized and you communicate well in a nice manner with your friends, and expect the kind of pushback slash questions, then you can communicate with them pretty well. That'll lead you to being more confident. And when you are more confident, then you probably will have the confidence to make that decision of having something different on the table compared to them, and being happy with that, because they're probably supporting you now as they're probably pushing back. So just one to ponder on. Hopefully that was a good episode. Hope you like that. If you have any questions on that, let me know your thoughts, and have a great week.